Hello, it is nice connecting with you on Childworld Initiative Channel. I am William Legi. I'll be interacting with you on the word environment. The ultimate goal of our interaction is to look at environment in the sense of the preschool environment. And so, this is the first in a series of interactions. The ultimate goal will also be to gain knowledge and skills as well as abilities in the area of providing or fostering an ideal environment, especially the ideal preschool environment. And you will begin to ask yourself, why are we so interested in environment? Why are we so interested in it? Now, we are interested in environment because it is very, very central to our survival and it is central to our growth. Central to our survival and growth, if you remember what we call the prenatal environment, that is the environment we were in before we were born. And when you look at how critical those things that are within the prenatal environment are to us, then you to realize that environment, whether the prenatal or the ones that are now physically surrounding us, well, you see, come to see how very, very critical they are to us. Now, we know that we're also interested in environment because it influences our development. It is not enough to survive. It is not enough to be growing. It is also very important for us to develop and develop holistically. Now, what do we mean by holistic development? If we are developing holistically, we are developing socially, we are developing physically, we are developing intellectually, we are developing in terms of our creative abilities, and at the same time, we are developing emotionally. That means we are developing in a comprehensive and holistic way. And when you look at the child that will be our focus, you will see that these are things that are very, very important for us to note when we are talking about child coming to school or child relating at home or child relating or interacting with peers. Holistic development is key and environment is critical to holistic development. Environment also shapes our behavior. Now, when we talk of behavior, we are looking at our own kind of interaction, the way we respond to things. We are looking at something that is so measurable. It is measurable in the sense that it is like we are responding to things within our environment. Like people will talk about stimulus response. We are looking at the observable outcomes and we are looking at the responses that are observable. And that is why you have the behaviorist theorists, the people that are proponents of the behaviorist theorists, of what we can call behaviorism. That is why they emphasize environment so critically. And when you also talk about environment, you see that it is central to learning. Central to learning because when we talk about learning, learning has to do with change that we see in terms of our behavior. But this change in behavior must be relatively permanent. And if it is to be relatively permanent, it means it must have been influenced or affected by things that are experienced, by things that are so critical, like by things that can actually shape our learning. That means what we used to know or what we used to do now modified by what we are doing or what there must have been an encounter or an experience with something. And all of these things will take place within an environment. So the environment itself is a broad concept, but what is there or how can we call an environment an environment? Basically, if you ask me what is an environment, I would just say simply that surroundings. And that will be a very, very general one. All the things that surround us, all the conditions that are external to us, but that are able to influence us, influence our behavior, influence our learning in several respects. And this environment can now include the immediate environment. And it can also extend towards other places. It can extend from the immediate environment to the outward environment. An example of an immediate environment can be the family, can be the home. And then we can also be interacting with peers. And we can also be interacting with peers or among peers in the school. And we can also find ourselves relating with community. That means from point to point, you are operating in an environment. The environment will have to be ideal. And if the environment is ideal, it fosters learning. And that brings us to what we can call the learning environment. Now, learning environment, broadly speaking, will be referring to those external conditions that can influence learning in the child. I say the learning environment will refer to those external conditions that can influence learning in the child. That means those conditions can actually shape learning. They can influence learning positively or negatively. In other words, when you have an environment that is stimulating, an environment that is rich in materials, for instance, an environment that is rich in people, especially the right kind of people, when you have an environment that is rich in terms of the way things are designed, there is every likelihood that the stimulation there will be of benefit to the child. And obviously, if you have an environment that is not stimulating, an environment that is dull, or an environment that is not inspiring, it means it is very likely that you have a child that will be growing up without the necessary kind of the stimulation. And once the stimulation is not there, the child may also not be able to perform optimally when it comes to learning. And so the environment that is external, especially to a preschool child, and which we can refer to as the learning environment, can include, for instance, the school walls, can include the school gates. The environment can also include the classrooms. As a matter of fact, classrooms become very, very critical because the children will spend the better part of their time in the classroom situation. Whether they are playing or learning or they are learning through play, the classroom becomes very central. In the classroom, you will have materials, you will have a lot of things that people will use to facilitate learning. And that will also include the boards. It could include the boards, whether it is now chalkboard or magnetic board or just whiteboard. It could include all of these things. Now, all of these things may affect or are likely to affect learning in the child. They are likely to even affect the motivation for learning. They are likely to determine whether the child will want to come to a classroom and will want to stay in a classroom. And if the environment is not well prepared, it means we may be having a situation whereby the child will want to opt out of that if the child had his way. Now, environments are supposed to be designed to meet the needs of this child, and that is why we call it the learning environment. The learning environment, for instance, is the environment that you have in any situation that can foster learning, that can foster change in behavior that will arise from experience, that will arise from exposure, that will arise from encounter. But the question is, those things that are within the environment, what sort of experience will they foster? What sort of encounter does the child have with those things? Are they the kind of experiences that will influence the child's learning positively, or that would actually remove the interest to even learn from the child entirely? And that is why it is very critical for us to look at environment. Like I said, this is an interaction on the learning environment, on the preschool environment. And like I said, the preschool environment is a learning environment. You know, like we have been talking about here. We said the ultimate goal will be for us to be able to learn, to be able to gain knowledge, skills, and abilities. It is not something that is done haphazardly. It is not something that happens by accident. Environment must be prepared. And if it is to be prepared and prepared very well, then we need to understand those things that we can call the components of a very stimulating or a very rich environment. And that is talking about ideal environment. But before we move into that one, I want us to remember that I said earlier that the environment that is prepared will be prepared to meet the needs of that preschool child. Will be prepared to meet the needs of even the child. You know, the child can be a secondary school child, for instance, can be a child in primary school, but essentially that child will operate in an environment that is stimulating. But we focus more on this level, we focus more on the preschool children because we know that if at this level of rapid intellectual development, at this level of rapid growth, at this level of rapid development in every aspect of their lives, we are able to give them what we can call the right kind of environment, the right things within the environment, then we will have succeeded in eliminating, at least to a large extent, some of those things that could actually cause there to be developmental challenges and challenges in terms of learning. And that is why it is critical to always remember that that environment that we call learning environment should be prepared or designed to meet their needs. And it is of very, very significant, very, very great importance. Now, it helps these children to see and to relate with the world around them meaningfully. If we are talking about preschool environment, in a prepared environment, these needs will include what we can call the warm and caring responses of the caregivers. That means the caregiver is a necessary part of the preschool environment. The teacher is a necessary part of an environment that is a learning environment. And so everyone, including those that are not even teaching, as long as they operate within or around the environment, they can influence these children in any way. And people can also help structure and support the learning of these children. In the course of our interaction, we have been able to look at the word environment. And in looking at the word environment, we have been able to relate it to the preschool environment, which, like I said, is the ultimate goal. And why we are looking at this, we are looking at this because we want to improve on our skills, we want to improve on our knowledge, we want to improve on our abilities. And like I mentioned, by the time we'll be meeting next, we'll be looking at the environment in an ideal setting. We'll be looking at the components of an ideal preschool environment. But until that time, I want you to do this. I want you to be able to comment. I want you to be able to like. I will appreciate it if you can subscribe. And by the time you are doing that, I will also want you to share it because it is critical for us to spread this information. It is critical for us to be able to not just spread, but be able to key into it and be working in the light of knowledge that our interaction has fostered. And until then, I am William Dege, signing out for now. Bye.